Hey everyone, this is Andrew from Private Investigator Advice, and this is the Private Investigator Podcast. This is going to be episode 104, and the episode is going to be called something to the effect of Private Investigation Private Investigation Company Trickery. You guys need to kind of beware of. But before we go into that, this episode is brought to you by Private Investigator Advice. Private Investigator Advice is selling several templates. Some are in bundles, some are individual. But basically, I sell a client request intake form. Basically, that's the information you want to get from your client prior to beginning any assignment. Kind of lays out the outline of what's going to be happening. And once you do that, we also sell you a private investigator retainer agreement. And that's going to put everything in paper. It's going to really set the expectations of what everybody's responsible for, and how much you're going to be getting paid, and all those different expectations. And I tried to put everything in there that I think you would possibly need. This is the one that I use. I obviously this is editable. You can change it to fit your business, but there might be some stuff in there that you didn't think of to help protect yourself in that agreement. And then there's also the workers' compensation interview template. That's got an example report, all the questions you need for a workers' compensation, an AOE, COE interview, and it'll really get you going. All of these templates, by the way, have a little example video in them to kind of help you get started with that. And of course, I've got the surveillance report template for those of you that are maybe thinking about getting into the surveillance industry, or maybe want to see what an example report from me would look like. There's that in there as well. But yeah, and that's got the template, the example, and again, in the little video walkthrough, it kind of walks you through each little section of that template. But anyways, so that is that all that will be in the video, in the YouTube details. It'll be in the podcast details if you're looking at your podcast app, with links for everything in there. I just did a review of this really kind of neat desk that you can use with your computer, or you don't even need to use your computer, but basically that adjusts to, like, if you're laying in bed. Definitely check that out. I'll actually put a link to the review in there in the details as well. And finally, before we jump into the podcast, make sure you give this a thumbs up if you're watching the video, if you liked it, or if you're watching the podcast, make sure or listening to the podcast, rather, you subscribe. And leave a review. I would appreciate the highest review possible if that is how you feel about the podcast. But anyways, we thank you guys for listening. So this private investigator trickery, right? Like, I want to make sure that I keep providing tips and information that's going to be you're going to be able to use in this industry, whether you're new or you've been in it a while. I just want to make sure that you're aware of the kind of stuff that happens. All right, let's get into the podcast. So, private investigator company trickery, right? So let me kind of provide some context here. So the insurance investigation industry is a highly competitive market for private investigators and private investigation companies alike. And if a company can secure work from a third-party administrator or insurance company, it can be a huge source of income for their company. But the funny thing is that, maybe it's not very funny, but insurance companies have become a little more pickier over the years of who works their files. And one of the things in particular that they've been picky about is that the company have their actual employees working the files. They don't want people that aren't actual employees working them. So you're probably thinking, like, okay, well, how else would that work, right? Well, companies are always trying to expand, right? They want to get into new markets. The bigger they can grow, and I mean, like, I'm talking like state wise. If they can move into different states, they're able to provide more value to future customers, and they can say, hey, we're available in, all 50, of the United States. But sometimes they can't grow that fast, right? They can't actually bring on employees in those areas fast enough. And so while maybe they're working on, I don't know, it kind of gets tricky, and I don't know all the ins and outs because I've never grown that big. But I know that even if they get licensed in that area, maybe they have a company license in that state, they might not be able to bring on an investigator because the work is so inconsistent. So what they end up doing is hiring subcontractors. And so what are subcontractors? Subcontractors are investigators like me who own their own business, and they go and work for the investigation company. They basically follow all the rules and guidelines that the company has. They might even actually be in the company's system and entering reports and submitting video through their systems. They have to sign a contract, and it's one of the main benefits of it is that you get to work at a different rate, a higher rate. Now, sometimes you can come in and work for these companies at like $65 an hour. And sometimes, you might be a lot lower, but it's usually much higher than the employee rate of what you would be making as an employee. And so, what there is there's no expectation of work, right? You when they call you, great. If they don't, you can't be knocking down the door yelling at them for the work because you're just a subcontractor, you're not an employee. So, and that's another thing. Subcontractors can turn down the work or turn down the assignment, or they can just be too busy and there's no repercussion. They just are not available. So a lot of times investigation companies will have a few vendors in a state. They kind of rotate through or stick with if one does better than the other, and only use the other one if they're in a bind. And so anyways, so where's all this trickery that I promised? So the objective of the trickery is from a company is kind of the same. It might vary a little bit, but there's been two situations in particular that I'm very familiar with, and I'm going to share what happened and then maybe why you should avoid this situation. So. The first time this happened to me, or was pitched to me rather, it was with a company that I worked for years. I had a wonderful relationship with. I was just a subcontractor or a vendor, whatever you want to call it. So they would call me, "Hey Andrew, are you available for surveillance? Or are you available for a recorded statement?" Something to that effect. And either I was available or I wasn't. If I was, I'd say, "Hey, yeah, I'm available these days. Does that work for you?" "Cool. Yeah, Andrew, that works. I'll throw you the case over." Fantastic. And anyway, so it was we had a good relationship. It was nothing bad. In fact, I knew many of the people that worked for the company for years and years and years. So I definitely trusted the company. But this company that I worked for many years approached me with this happened several years ago, but they asked me to come on as an employee. And they wanted me to come on as an employee because one of their clients would only allow employees to work their assignments, and they wouldn't let subcontractors like me, no matter how good of a relationship how I had with them, no matter with the company or how good I was, it didn't matter. This was their policy. So. I was trying to remember back, but I'm pretty sure they explained that I would be paid like an employee every 2 weeks at a higher rate than most, with mileage and like the standard investigative package. And I couldn't tell you what that was all about because this happened many years ago. And then they said I would only work files as an employee, as under the employee thing. When it was a client that only required that, right? So, they have many clients, and again, some clients only wanted employees from the investigation company to work their files. So, in theory, if it was only the employee mandated investigations, then I would get paid the employee rate. And for all other assignments, I would get paid the vendor rate. And the vendor rate for me would be something like an all-inclusive. I'm going to charge you this much for general cases around my area. I'm not going to charge you for mileage. It's just going to be I'm not going to charge you for report writing. I'm just going to charge you for, the hourly, work time. And so that was kind of like my deal with them. My vendor deal with them. Anyways, and so, as much as of a good relationship that I had with this company, I ended up declining the offer, and I explained to them, like, as much as I did trust them, I mean, I've just been in this industry so long that as much as I trust them, I don't trust anybody. And so I explained to them there was really no way of truly tracking, what companies actually would require, an employee versus that we're okay with having vendors. Vendors work the case. And so I said, no, I'm sorry, and these are my reasons why. I hope everything's cool. And anyways, I continued to work as a subcontractor or a vendor, whatever you want to call it, for many, many, many years with them. After that, and until where the only reason I stopped doing so much work for them, because I was working a lot for them, the only reason I stopped was my family situation changed, and I ended up passing a lot of that work off to a good friend. And so a good friend of mine ended up taking over most of the assignments. I still work, a handful of assignments, maybe a year, but my buddy gets the majority of it now. So my buddy came on board for them, and he continued working as a vendor for them, right? Not an employee, but he came on as a vendor. And I think it was about after a year of working for them, they proposed the same thing to him. And he accepted. So, basically the same agreement. He was offered, when the client only requires an employee, then you'll work this and you'll get the employee rate. When they don't require that, then you'll get the vendor rate. And so that happened. They would split it from time to time. Hey, this is an employee only. Hey, this is this one doesn't care. Here's your vendor rate. And that went on for a little while, but over time, the vendor work, right, under his vendor rate started to decline, and over I don't know how long it went, but over time it ended up being to where all of his assignments were just at an employee rate, and he no longer got his vendor rate. And I remember him calling me, and he was like, hey, did you do this with them? And I said, no, I said I couldn't do that. I wasn't going to do that. And he's like, yeah, this is what's happening to me. Now I'm basically only like an employee now. I don't even get my vendor rate. And he was really upset about that. And he was frustrated because he felt that he would make more money, obviously, by being able to be, just working as a vendor. And so, and so, yeah, I think he's still bothered by that. I think it's kind of tough when, you're still trying to make a living, and, in your mind, you have a certain expectation of work you're going to get from, different companies that you work for if you subcontract a lot. And so, this was kind of tough for him to swallow. So anyways, he felt like he was getting taken advantage of, I think, was the main thing. And that's one of the things in this industry that does happen if you allow it. Okay. So the second time this trickery took place, it was a little bit more sneakier. I got a call from a company that I was very familiar with. Again, I knew some people over there, and they were looking for a subcontractor in the area that I work. And they asked if I could be, subcontractor. And I'll be honest with you, I'm really picky, no matter who it is or how well known they are. Like, I still want to know what kind of company they are. I want to know how they treat their vendors. I want to know how they treat their employees. All that's very important to me because I've been around long enough to know when there's a bad culture somewhere and when there's a good culture. And I was, whatever, I kind of asked around and, tried to find out a little bit more, but from what I gathered during that time, I was like, okay, well, I guess they wouldn't be too bad to be subcontractors for. The rate was what I was looking for. I didn't really have any expectation for how many assignments I was going to get, but anyways, it seemed like a good enough company to go ahead and be a subcontractor for. So I agreed, and so I went through all their, I filled out the contracts and. Proof of my insurance and my, whatever, the normal stuff that happens when you subcontract for somebody. Anyways. And so, they had said, oh yeah, well maybe, one or two cases a month. I'm like, cool. That's probably all they have the time for, for you anyways. And so it was like no sooner than, that I finished doing the subcontractor paperwork that they had asked me to, hey, would you mind coming on as an employee too? And I'm like, what? Like, no, I just wanted to be a vendor for you guys. Like, and they're like, well, yeah, no, this is what would happen. We would pay you this specific rate. And again, it was the same story. We'd pay you the employee rate for companies that only require employees, and we'll pay you the vendor rate, for the times, that they don't require. And like, listen, if you're not interested in working any of those files, or you don't want to, you don't want it, no problem. I'm like, like, fine. Yeah, whatever. And honestly, in my mind, I honestly didn't know how many cases I was going to take from them anyways. Like I'm busy. I'm a busy guy. I already had enough work. So I wasn't incredibly worried about like missing out on any work from them if they offered it, or I wasn't happy with, like everything was going to be, employee only based salary. And with that being said, the employee based salary wasn't horrible. It's just the vendor rate is much, much better. And so anyways, I ended up agreeing and talking to one of the managers that I've known for probably, 15 years. I haven't talked to him in 13, but I mean, basically we worked together when I entered this industry. In fact, I think I was his boss for a short period of time, and he happens to be a manager in this company. And I'm like, okay, so let's just, play it straight with me, buddy. Like how many assignments you get in the state of Washington that aren't required for an employee? And he's like, oh, well, like right now we only have employee only cases. And I'm like, that's what I thought, man. And so so this happened, right? And in my own brain, I'm like, that's like one little check mark. Like, yeah, that's integrity, right? Like they really did make it sound like there's so many different types of files coming in that, whatever, that I just didn't know what I was going to get. It could be a vendor assignment. It could be an employee only assignment. And so I just kind of was like, okay, all right. That's good to know. Well, I can always turn it down, so I'm not too worried about it. And so, yeah, I did end up agreeing to come on board with them. And I did, I did take some of their assignments over that year. And yeah, I mean, I think it's basically the same thing that happened to me, or happened to my friend, ended up happening to me. I don't do that many assignments for this company anymore for a variety of reasons. But it's just something that you need to be aware of. And listen, if you don't mind coming on board you just might as well consider yourself an employee for a company. Then this is no problem. Everybody has to make a living. When things are good, you can turn down things that don't seem as valuable. So for an example, if your vendor rate, if your subcontract rate is $65 an hour, and that's what people pay you to go work assignments for their company, fantastic. And if you have a lot of that work, fantastic. I'm so happy for you. And then those assignments, like I just mentioned to you, where they're trying to get you on as an employee and you know that you're not going to make as much, it's easy to turn those down when everything is good. But when everything is not so good and you do need the money, your standards might come down a little bit. Like, you know what? Maybe that's not so bad. Maybe I'll just take that for now, just to get me through this month. And so, listen, the main point of this wasn't to bash any of these companies. I mean, certainly have my own opinions on that kind of way of doing things. Kind of like, oh yeah, it'll be vendor too, and then really they just want to get you integrated into the employee because it's better for them. You just need to know that ahead of time. You need to know that. So going into it, that there's a good chance that no matter what they tell you, you're only going to be coming in as an employee. And so as long as you understand that going into it, whatever, right? But I just don't want you to get kind of blindsided like my friend did. And I wasn't so blindsided the second time. I kind of knew what was going to happen, but it also kind of shaped my impression of the company because everything kind of seems presented as in, yeah. No, most of this is going to be vendor work. Yeah, but we just need to get you on the books as an employee too. That kind of thing. And then when it comes down to it, really, they just want to pay you less. And that's kind of, I think, the main objective of this. So It's a new thing, maybe, and when I say new, probably in the past couple of years. I think all the kind of companies are kind of doing it now. Kind of that's the way of integrating people into their company. But yeah, no worries. If this is something you're okay with, then sweet, get into the company and do the thing. But I just didn't want you to be surprised by the switching that'll happen from vendor to employee. So, anyways, that was basically it. It's just more of a kind of like a beware, of what could possibly happen. And I would also say this. Now, when you sign contracts or agreements with these companies, to whether it's be a subcontractor or you're going to come in as an employee, you need to read those contracts, because you would be shocked by some of what the stuff says in there. I've literally read stuff and I've been like, I'm not signing this unless this gets changed, because I know how that's going to go. I mean, it's totally not in my favor. I've read where people have been like, or I've been told, some people have said, yeah, I was going to go subcontract with this company, but they said I couldn't compete with them if I subcontract with them in a 100-mile radius, which they live in that 100-mile radius. So read your contracts and make sure, there's no trickery in there either. And don't be afraid that, if you read something you don't like, be like, hey, I don't agree with this, so I'm either going to change this or we don't have an agreement. And don't be afraid of that, because you really, in the long haul, need to be looking out for your best interests. But anyways, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you found some value in this, and I will definitely be making many more reviews in the coming weeks, and there'll be more uptick in the PI advice world. But yeah, very excited, guys. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them in the video comments, or you guys can jump on Facebook onto the PI Advice Facebook page. Like the page. I always answer questions on there. You can message me directly on there, and that would be fine too. All right, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.